Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode on the Lamborghini build. We're nearing the end of it at last. Now we've finally realized that you can't just extract the ECU, engine and wiring from one car and stuff it into another one. That's something a professional needs to handle. And so today we've invited someone who's a true master of his craft, who's gonna be reworking, reconfiguring and then installing the wiring loom. We'll get the car to run in this episode, so you guys make yourselves comfy and let's get this show on the road. So guys, after 3 full days of working on it here in the garage and countless hours working at home, Boris tells me the Lambo is ready for its first startup. But before we do that, let's discuss what we did wrong. So where did we screw up when transplanting the harness from one car to the other? Why didn't it run before and why is it going to now?
Okay, so there were 2 main problems. Number 1, the car wasn't starting from the starter motor.
We thought the starter motor was the problem and we bought a new one.
And the car still wouldn't start. Now the second issue we identified while we were doing repairs, and that was the burnt out ECU.
How they even did it is beyond me. 2 things were destroyed in particular. Number 1, the ignition driver, which is pretty much the same on all Nissans. The second thing was the circuitry that blocks the starter motor when the car is in gear. Now that does not affect how the engine starts. The point is to prevent a situation when you get behind the wheel, turn the key when the car is in gear and it lunges forward. Now I started by trying to figure out where mistakes were made, and it was quite a process, with me having to go through pretty much the entire harness, dissecting it and marking all of the wires. I'm pretty thorough when it comes to these sorts of things. The approach of a true professional. Each one of them is marked. I don't know what this one says. Now it took quite a while for me to take some measures ensuring I don't fry the new ECU, and given how rare these ECUs are, that was crucial. So I had to measure the voltage on all of the circuits and make sure the multipliers are functional, that there aren't any short circuits. After sorting the loom, I started working on the second problem, which was the car refusing to start. Now I'm pretty sure the car wasn't starting due to multiple problems at once, so it wasn't a matter of fixing a single wire and getting it to work. That said, there were a couple of basic things, such as the starter motor ground wire, plus the ground on the engine block and the crankshaft position sensor, the main one that's located next to the flywheel. Now one common issue on these VQ motors is the crankshaft position sensor sitting too close to the starter, resulting in a bit of electromagnetic interference. That's a good reason not to use Chinese-made starters on these VQs. They're usually pretty low quality and that makes the situation even worse. Okay, so you're saying that even when it's all properly connected, a bad ground can lead to stuff not working because you've got a lot of interference?
Yeah, pretty much. Forget about the interference for a second. There's also the matter of a weak signal coming from the crank sensor itself, and that's a serious problem in our case. Given that this engine, with how old it is, it's gonna have the timing chain stretched out, and a weak signal from that sensor is going to create a sort of dislocation, I guess you can call it, in what the ECU is picking up. The timing is going to stay the same essentially, but the ECU is misreading it, because the impulse from the crank position sensor is weaker when the engine is being turned by the starter motor compared to if it were actually running. So a stretched out timing chain is among the factors that contribute to creating a bunch of issues that are difficult to pinpoint.
The stretched out chain is something we never considered. When we bought the Nissan, I recall Igor test driving it and telling me the engine was fire, that it pulled like a beast, ran like clockwork and so forth. A stretched out chain won't necessarily keep it from running, but if you want a perfect engine, that's gonna require a comprehensive approach. Replacing rings and bearings, the chain is gonna come last. So right now, regardless of the timing chain issue, the engine will work like it was meant to,
on a satisfactory level.
I suggest we try starting it and listen to how it runs. I mean, before it was misfiring, shaking, it really wasn't happy, and the only real way to get it running was to push start the car. Curious whether it'll be able to start while standing in place.
God help us. Okay, so we've got a few wires that read positive, ignition, and that's how we start the Lambo in the meantime.
The moment of truth. Come on. Boris has just worked a bit of magic and we're going to try this again. Fingers crossed that it starts. I mean, this is totally unacceptable. Come on. Come on now. Come on. Yes, it started on its own. We didn't even have to push it. Yeah, man, give me 5. We did it. You did it! I am so glad to hear it run. I mean, it was struggling at first, but then you cleared its throat, and now it's running pretty smoothly even. It is running a bit rich though. Well, regardless, we are past that threshold between the car refusing to run and, well, working. I take it we are done with the basics, and now we just need to work on the small stuff. The hardware is what we need to tend to. We've shown the people that it's a working motor. It doesn't run ideally, but that has nothing to do with the wiring or the ECU. So what do you think? How long before we are done and able to take the car to a racetrack? First, we need to assemble the cooling system so that the engine can at least run at idle. Then we hook up the diagnostics and... I just love these moments. When at first, one thought comes to mind, like it's gonna take a day, but then you're like, nah, I'd better say it's 3 days to give me a bit of leeway. Yeah, it's about a day's work. A day of work in comfortable conditions to get the engine up and running, bring the car outside, perhaps flip it around and let it spit smoke that way. So are you going to be connecting any sort of like oil pressure or temperature sensors? At the very least, I'll be hooking up a light that's going to warn us if the engine overheats. It's a must-have and there's not much to it. You're not connecting anything to the dash. It's literally just a wire, a sensor, and a light. Okay, then let's start putting together the cooling system with the associated fans, radiators, install the battery, fix any problems we need to, wrap the wiring, and get the car into proper working condition. Okay guys, now to the main plot twist of this video. Yegor is currently in Vietnam, he doesn't have a return ticket, and so who's gonna be working on the hardware?
Surprise, surprise! These guys pissed away 9 months, but tomorrow it'll be on the track, I give you my word. I have been waiting for this moment for so long to get close to this girl, while that bearded guy is on vacation.
He'll get the car running in a heartbeat. Show Roman some love in the comments, guys.
So we had a theory that the engine was running rich. We removed all 6 spark plugs, and they were drenched in gasoline.
Like they were literally wet.
So the fuel system on this motor consists of 2 rails, which are fed by the fuel pump. There are 6 fuel injectors, and those are sealed using 1 and 2 rubber O-rings. The fuel is dispersed in between them through those tiny nozzles, and if this lower seal were to go bad, you would get unwanted fuel blow-by, excess fuel in the combustion chamber. This theory definitely makes sense. The car actually started with no fuel. It happened all of a sudden and by accident, with no fuel and the pump disconnected. So we've heated the plugs, now we allow the combustion chambers to dry, saved it, and start the engine.
So we've been at this for almost a month, guys. We started sorting the electronics in December. Now it's mid-January and we still haven't solved the issue. Right now we're about to share what exactly is going on at the moment.
After toiling away for the entire day yesterday, we did achieve some positive results.
The engine is able to start, and this is how we do it.
The engine runs.
Oh man, so much smoke!
The engine starts every time, but only when it's cold. But after it runs for a bit and gets up to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit or so, it refuses to keep going, and we can't start it until it gets cold again. The problem is caused by a crooked trigger wheel for the crank position sensor. When heated, it starts to warp, and the sensor goes offline.
But that's not even the only problem with this engine. There is so much more wrong with it that we're actually considering replacing it at this point. Now, we're considering replacing it not because we can't solve these problems. We've identified every single one of them, and it's not even that we can't fix them. The problem is that repairs would just be pretty cost prohibitive. There's so much wrong with this engine that we'll have to pull it out, order a bunch of parts, which aren't even that easy to come by nowadays. Well, for this version of the motor anyway. I'll remind you that we were barely even able to find an ECU for this engine. But on the other hand, an engine swap is not going to be easy to pull off. The placement here is pretty unconventional, meaning we'll have to look for an engine with a gearbox that transfers torque not to a tail shaft, but instead splits it in two directions. What sort of options do we even have in our situation? Well, aside from the obvious Audi, the 100? Yeah, the Audi 100, the front-wheel drive version of that. The axle shafts on that are pretty much poking out from the bell housing, but there is an issue inherent to that gearbox. The thing is that they worked well until a certain torque number. You know, when you're working on a sports car, it becomes pretty hard to find a decent gearbox. So if the idea is to fit a high horsepower engine to this car, then sourcing a gearbox that's going to be able to hold the torque will be pretty much impossible. And as for V8s, V10s, and V12s, I take it none of those are going to work in our application, right? I mean, those engines, if we even find a V12 for a reasonable price, it's going to be something prehistoric. It's not going to provide the power we need, so it's not going to give us what we're looking for. It's basically going to just be there for show. You know, I understand now. In this type of situation, you weld up a frame first, and then buy some kind of popular engine with a common ECU, electronics, and so on. Oh man, things are looking grim. We've been filming this episode for a month, with not much to show for it. You would have noticed that on film, we've mostly been talking, but in fact, a ton of work has been done. Give it a few days and we'll be seeing comments to the effect of, where's the Lambo? We want to see new videos. Why aren't you guys releasing any new footage? Well, we are working, as a matter of fact. We're just not really getting anywhere. There's not a lot we can do. I don't even know when we'll be dropping a new episode. First off, we need to decide what we're doing. If we are going to be swapping the engine, we either need to find a donor car or just the separate engine. And then there's installing the damn thing, making a new harness. I mean, that's a lot of work from the ground up. I think we need to seek advice from Yegor, him being the mastermind behind the build. It'd be wrong to make a decision without his input, but then we can't reach him, since he's somewhere in a jungle in Vietnam. So that's your news update. I don't even know. Some of you guys are gonna write that we're lazy, that the car is just sitting there, when in fact we are working and something is actually happening every day. It's just that we haven't achieved much. The car runs, but not for long. We were so confident in the beginning that we'll make it to the track, but ultimately weren't able to. I mean, we can go to the track. The car will start. I mean, even the brakes are done. The problem is that it's just going to stall after 10 minutes and refuse to start after. Okay, that's all the news for now. Subscribe to the channel, guys, and be patient, please. Like, show your support in the comments. We need them likes. Big thanks for tuning in, and see you soon.